I might be in over my head on this restoration. Today I'm going to be working on the worst pair of shoes that I've ever had to work on, a pair of military blue 4s from 2012. Every part of the shoe from the leather, the nubuck to the soles is in disarray. I honestly feel when I'm looking at the shoe that this shoe was beat up on purpose. It makes zero sense how a shoe could be uncared for this badly. The toe boxes on both shoes have heavy creasing and a whole bunch of paint that is lifted off of them. The sock liners on both shoes are in really bad condition, as you can see, and specifically around the Achilles tendon, it looks like the shoe was just cut through with a knife. Unfortunately, the camera does not pick up how dirty these shoes are. It honestly looks like they were buried for a month or two and then dug back up. And here, unfortunately, are what is left of the outsoles. They've been worn through so much that you can see the white rubber beneath the blue coating. Majority of the tread on the outsoles is also rubbed off, and you can see large holes in the right shoe. And I'd assume for most of you watching that you've already picked up on the large holes in both shoes. The nubuck toe caps have been completely worn through, and it also seems the previous owner tried to fix them by putting blue paint on them, which didn't work. The holes also got so bad that the leather on the upper of the shoe has also caused a small tear to form. To start off, I'm going to go ahead and get the midsoles and outsoles off the shoes, and I'm not going to be reusing the outsoles obviously, as they are unsavable. To separate the upper of the shoes from the midsoles, I'm using some acetone, and to cut the toe cap stitching, I'm just using an X-Acto knife. Here you can unfortunately see the extent to what the outsoles were worn down to. And unfortunately, the midsoles are crumbling, despite when I was looking at them from the exterior, there was no crumbling signs at all. Before I do anything else with the rest of the upper of the shoe, I'm going to go ahead and clean them down just to make sure that there isn't any other hidden issues with them. During the cleaning process, there was some paint flaking specifically on the toe caps of both shoes, and on the left shoe, unfortunately, there seems to be some black mold on them. Honestly, I'm not too surprised just because of how bad these shoes are. While I'm waiting for the donor shoes to come in, I'm going to go ahead and keep cleaning the upper of the shoes. After I found the black mold, I went ahead and threw a tiny bit of bleach into the cleaning solution to hopefully kill the mold that was left on the shoes. And here are the donor shoes that I'm going to be using. Here I'm using a pair of white Oreo Jordan 4s from 2021. Instead of cutting the toe cap stitching, I'm going ahead and pulling it out, as I want to reuse this later on. This will also limit the damage that it can do to the leather toe caps, as I want to make sure that they're in good condition. Now that I have the donor shoes in hand, I'm going ahead and cutting off the original nubuck toe caps. If you made it to this part of the video and are enjoying it, it'd be greatly appreciated if you went ahead and liked and subscribed. And if you're interested in seeing some before and after photos of each restoration, you can go ahead and follow the MHS Instagram and TikTok accounts. After I cut out the pieces that I'll need to restore the upper of the shoe, I also went ahead and figured out how I'm going to go ahead and fix the sock liners on both shoes. I ended up cutting some of the foam out of the donor pair of shoes just so that I could use it as a replacement. After that, I just went ahead and restitched the sock liner back together. Before I stitch the new toe caps onto the shoes, I'm going to go ahead and repaint them. So I'm going to go ahead and use some cotton balls and acetone to get any paint remaining on the upper of the shoe off, and I'll use some 400 grit sandpaper to lightly scuff the upper. I must say, whoever tried to previously restore these shoes used a whole bunch of paint. Before I started this restoration, I went ahead and experimented with some suede that I had lying around, and found that when you iron it down, you can get a nubuck-like texture from suede. So since the new toe caps are made of leather, I'm going to go ahead and sand off the leather off of them. The reasoning that I'm ironing the suede is because it helps flatten down the pile on the suede. This also makes it a lot more difficult for things like brushes to make it come up. In between ironing sessions, I went ahead and sanded down the new toe cap panels just because I was able to get a smoother finish that way. As I mentioned before, I'm going ahead and repainting the upper of the shoes as I want to make sure I'm getting paint on every inch that could be covered by the new panels. One of the big parts of the military blue Jordan 4 is that the nubuck on the toe caps of the shoes is a light gray. So to get this, I went ahead and used some light gray Angelus suede dye, as it seemed to be the closest thing that I could find. While the new toe caps were drying, I went ahead and threw the outsoles into the light box just to get rid of any oxidization that was left. The outsole on the military blue 4s also has some light gray on the front and back of the outsole, so I'm also using the light gray dye just to dye the back part of the outsole. Before I started stitching the new toe caps onto the shoes, I found out that the left one is a lot larger and fits onto both uppers of the shoes, while the right one doesn't fit on either. When I measured the wingspan of both of the panels, I found out that the right one is 1.25 inches shorter than the left one. So to fix this, I'm going to have to make a custom cutout. So I ended up using the left toe cap and just flipped it over just to make sure that it would fit the right shoe perfectly. I was luckily able to find a leather that feels almost identical to nubuck, so I ended up using this to make the custom cutout. It took quite a lot of searching to find the exact leather that I needed because I wanted to make sure that the thickness was near original. And the custom panel ended up measuring out to a 14.25 inches, which is a tiny bit bigger to hopefully adjust for any miscalculations. I also was able to fix the hole in the left shoe by using some Angelus leather filler. I won't be able to stitch in this exact area just because I don't want to end up tearing through it, so I'll end up having to glue the new panel down there. Just like my last video, I'm going to go ahead and stitch the new panel on with a crisscross pattern, as it is a lot easier to do that. Unfortunately, I ended up making a major mistake when I was stitching the new panel onto the upper. In the beginning, I ended up stitching it a little too tight, which ended up causing some big fitment issues, which I'd have to fix later on. And just like every other Jordan restoration I've done, I'm going ahead and sanding down the midsole to get any of the original glue off, and also to help with the fitment on the shoes. And here I'm going ahead and sanding down the outsole of the shoes. For this shoe, I'm only sanding down the areas that I need to put blue paint or dye, just because this should hopefully help it adhere a little bit better to the outsoles. This was the only option that I could do for these shoes, just because I wasn't able to find a pair of military blue 4s in good condition in the same size. And here's the final result. Well, not final result, but the final stitch on the left shoe. You can see that it fits up very well with the new midsole and outsole of the shoes, which unfortunately did not apply to the right shoe. And unfortunately, here's the right shoe. Honestly, it just turned out very poorly. You can see a lot of creasing in the new panel, and also the panel was way too short. The worst part though is on the side of the shoe, where it just completely covers up all of the nubuck. Honestly, I don't have any other choice but to make a new panel. But before I go ahead and do that, since I'm tired of stitching, I'm going to go ahead and decrease both toe boxes. And specifically on the right shoe, I'm hoping that it'll be a lot easier for me to stitch it. Since I messed up the last toe cap panel, I'm going to go ahead and take a slightly different approach to it this time. This time, I cut up my original template and spliced them together to get a perfect fitment on the new panel. And also, while I was cutting out the new panel, I went ahead and added a little extra length onto it, just in case I ended up measuring incorrectly. Now with the new panel stitched on, I'm going to go ahead and start painting the midsole, as this is the last thing that I need to do. And here is the new panel. As you can see, it looks a lot better as there's not many creases or folds in the new panel. The reason that this new panel looks so much better than the previous one is that I added some backing material behind it. This ended up making the toe cap much more rigid, which allowed it to keep shape easier. For the backing material, I ended up using 2 patches of suede with some cardstock paper in between. For this backing material, the suede isn't necessarily the backing material as it's not adding any rigidity. The goal for the suede here was to make the new toe cap look more filled out. For the midsole, I ended up having to make a custom blue paint match. For this paint match, I ended up going with a little bit of a darker blue compared to the 2012s, but this darker paint ends up matching a little bit closer to the original 2006 pair. For both the white and blue parts of the midsole, I ended up having to sand up to 800 grit as this midsole seemed to be a little bit rough. To finish up the upper of the shoes, I'm going to go ahead and use the same paint that I used on the midsole to repaint the blue tabs on the shoes, as they are a little faded and have a whole bunch of sanding marks on them. And finish off the restoration before I go ahead and glue the soles back to the upper of the shoes, I'm going to go ahead and paint the areas on the outsole that need to be painted blue. For the outsole, I personally would have rather used some dye, but I wasn't able to find any blue dye that matched the color match that I'd used on the midsole of the shoe.